Hello, this is the week ahead. We're entering the third week of February, Valentine's week, actually. That's going to be the big deal. And of course, when it comes to Valentine's Day, many of us are indeed trying to book for restaurants that we've never booked for the past 2 years. And a quick search around KL, including fancy ones like Marini 57, Nobu, and the likes, are all fully booked. Now, we're talking about tables at over 1,000 ringgit here. And on one hand, these prices are indeed inflated. On the other hand, it is also, of course, important for us to celebrate that domestic spending is indeed increasing. Particular research from JP Morgan by the analyst shows that domestic consumption boost in the fourth quarter does drive up GDP 3.3% or 3.1%, lower estimate, shows that domestic spending is indeed trying to be helped up or buoyed by domestic spending. So we're going to see a lot more domestic spending going to take place over the next few weeks. But with it comes the story of inflation. We're going to touch about a little bit on inflation very shortly. But my name is Ibrahim Sani, and this show covers the whole topic of what's going to take place over the next 7 days. Indeed, the most important thing right now is on the rise of cases of COVID. And a quick stock take into the type or the elements of where we are at right now. Cases are well into the five figures, but category 1 and category 2 are dominating that kind of space right now, with over 97% of cases being reported to be in either category 1 or category 2. Hospitalization rates still low. And of course, this is all bearing testament to that whole idea of vaccination works. This is, of course, entering the second week of Pick Kids, the vaccination programs targeted at 5 to 12-year-olds. For adults, booster shots are being carried out. Some important numbers to cover. One, of course, is the story of over 80% of population of Malaysia has been vaccinated at least single dose. 79% to date have gotten at least 2 doses. Adults, 40% are being boosted or have been boosted. So the booster rates are still low, but dose 1, dose 2 for total population is there. So now the question is, when we have high vaccination rates but low booster shots, high positive numbers but low hospitalization rate, does the looming MCO come into the picture? Now, this is something that the Prime Minister has debunked, because Prime Minister Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri reiterates that the government will not reinforce any MCO or movement control order or declare another emergency despite a surge in COVID-19 infections. Malaysia, of course, has recorded over 20,000 cases. And of course, Malaysians, he adds, need to live with COVID-19 and view it as an endemic, just like other infectious diseases, like the flu, like the dengue, and keeping to comply with SOPs to keep COVID under control. Meanwhile, he says that the cabinet has yet to discuss a proposal by the NRC, or the National Recovery Council, to reopen the country's borders by March 1st. According to him, the Health Ministry had yet to provide feedback on the proposal for evaluation by the Cabinet. So that's one thing that the Cabinet has to look into this Wednesday when it comes to the re-evaluation of an MCO. But the reiteration by the Prime Minister is stating that there will be no MCO, there will be no reinforcement of emergency, we just have to deal with it. I, for one, am completely in agreement with him. We had enough of the MCOs. At that point in time, it was necessary. Right now, it is not. Right now, we just need to get our booster shots. If you're an adult and you haven't gotten your booster shot, get it. If you're a parent and you haven't vaccinated your young children yet, do it. Those are the kind of responsibilities that's on your head. So you need to do your part. On our end, we just need to keep our policies open and our business open. Those are the kind of ideas that is currently happening when it comes to MCO. Now, as promised, I was talking about the inflation rate and commenting on inflation numbers. Tan Sri Nur Shamsiah says, she's the Bank Negara governor, that inflation to remain moderate in 2022. If you believe her, closer to its long-term average, while core inflation is likely to remain modest this year. This is, of course, according to the Governor of Bank Negara. She says that the upward price pressure we are seeing right now had mainly been due to supply chain disruptions arising from the pandemic. And of course, one needs to look into the whole concept of what it means. Let's listen to Tan Sri Nur Shamsiah right now.
While we see recovery in demand amid the reopening of the economy, income growth remains steady and inflation is more of a supply-driven phenomenon. And while inflation is expected to remain high due to the cost factors in the beginning of the year, for the whole of 2022, we expect inflation to remain moderate, closer to its long-term average. There is also continued slack in our economy and job market. So as such, core inflation is still expected to remain modest.
Having said that, the cabinet is working in tandem with the committee to look into inflation. And I'm sure that this week we're going to see a little bit more information when it comes to the inflation rate and whether or not it is indeed rising due to the supply chain constraint or something much deeper than that. Last week on my show Notepad with Ibrahim Sani, my show, we were talking about all these items, particularly when it comes to the duality between the US market and the Chinese market and how they're going to be reacting differently this year. The US is expected to have 3 up to 5 rate hikes. China is going to hold steady. Malaysia apparently is going to be holding at least one interest rate hike. And this is, of course, trying to address the whole notion of low interest rate market and whether or not we need to get on a risk-on, risk-off strategy for inflation rates and for investment. Those are a bit too technical to discuss on this show on the week ahead, but it's worth noting that some of the ideas include the possibility of inflation hitting 7% to 10% in the US and some numbers to hit China, and that would have a knock-on effect to Malaysia eventually towards mid-year, maybe even end of the year. Remember, it's an election year. Inflation is never good when it comes to election. So all of this is going to be talked about in the weeks to come. But at least for this week, do keep a lookout from the update coming in from the cabinet. That's going to come on Wednesday, maybe Thursday and Friday. We're going to see some announcements. So those are the kind of things that you need to look out for. We'll go for one short break. When we come back, we'll discuss a little bit more about COVID-19. Welcome back to The Week Ahead. I'm your host, Ibrahim Sani. This is a show that shall explore the kind of items that shall take place over the next 7 days. We move on to politics because the Election Commission has announced dates for the polling day for the Johor State Election. It's going to be done on March 12th. Nomination day is going to be on February 26th. The Election Commission Chairman, Dato' Abdul Ghani Saleh, said that the 14-day campaign would start on February 26th after nomination. He said that the EC will station 56 election officers, aided by over 180 assistant managers, to monitor the campaign activities. Meanwhile, he added that early polling will be held on March 8th. A total of 2.597 million voters are eligible to cast their ballots in this state election. In fact, people tend to forget that Johor State has one of the higher amount of voters. We're looking at 2.6 million voters. We're also looking at a very sizable chunk of Undi 18 voters that are eligible to vote for the first time. Those aged 18, 19, and 20 will not only be able to cast their votes for the first time, they can also stand for election if they wanted to. That's the beauty of it. So, how will this impact the kind of reactions that will come from voter turnout? Which is also another topic that we need to talk about, because the EC has targeted a 70% voter turnout in the upcoming state election. Can this be achieved? Now, we asked political analyst Professor Dr. Kartini Khalid on how the voters can be encouraged to come out to vote this March. Hear her out.
Well, we can always look at the incentive and initiative. and both incentive and initiative would be ways to increase voters turnout. Incentive means giving cash allowance for voters outside Johor to come back and vote. The initiative could be providing free transportation for voters in rural and semi-urban, driving them to the poll centers. And I think NGO can play a good role here in terms of increasing political participation among voters by sponsoring a van, a taxi, or perhaps Grab for voters to go out and vote during the election day. I think the incentive and the initiative would be a practical way to motivate and increase voters turnout.
Now, that is also not on the onus of the NGOs, as suggested by Dr. Kartini just now. We need to look into the political party participation as well in trying to entice their own voters to come out to vote for them. This is an ability that is quite, I just don't understand why it's not comprehensible for political parties in Malaysia. Because if you look at other democratically, charged nations, it's the political parties that are trying to rally out and canvass voters out to the voting centers. In Malaysia, it's not quite like that, or at least not quite nationwide like that. And because of that, we're going to see some expectations that the voter turnout might not hit the EC's 70% target. Just like in Malacca and perhaps even in Sarawak, however, we understand there's a lot of nuances when it comes to Sarawak state elections. There's going to be about 65% voter turnout in terms of how things are going to shape up on the day itself. 70%, if you ask me, is a rather lofty target set by the EC. So because of that, what happens when you have a low voter turnout? What normally happens is that some incumbent parties tend to win. And because of that, this Johor State Election might already be anticipating a clear winner, even ahead of the polls. So those are the kind of ideas that we need to think about in the week ahead when it comes to trying to get voters for the Johor State elections out. Not many people know, half of my family members are from Johor. They are Johor voters, even though they reside in KL. Based on the conversations that I've had with them, not many of them are going down to Johor. And I've been trying to get them to go down to Johor to vote, but because of the rising cases of COVID, there's some reluctancy and hesitancy in that sense. Now, of course, because people can't travel to Johor, and because, mobility is going to be a big issue, we need to talk about postal votes. Now, Malaysians living abroad in 4 neighboring countries are now eligible for postal voting in the upcoming Johor polls. This is according to the Election Commission, because these individuals can apply from today until February 18. Now, February 18 is coming up very fast this week to cast their ballots. If somehow or other you are watching this show outside of Malaysia and happen to be a Johor voter, well, you have until February 18 to apply to the EC for being a postal voter. Now, we speak with Undi 18 co-founder Kira Yusri on simplifying the voting process for all Malaysians.
The idea is that how do we, make the process easier for first-time voters. Already they're probably facing a tough choice of choosing their leaders. Let's make the process, the democratic process, easier and accessible for them. We're also hoping to engage with Malaysians abroad, especially to highlight the importance of postal voting, because this will be, so usually, if you don't know, usually Malaysia and Singapore do not qualify for postal voting, but ever since COVID, they now do have they are now able to do postal voting. So the risk is that many Malaysians may not know about it because they have to register to become a postal voter. You don't just, the embassy don't automatically know you're there. The EC doesn't automatically know you live abroad. So they have to register themselves and, provide EC enough time to get the ballots to them, for them to mark their votes and then mail the ballots back to Malaysia and making sure that it arrives the same day as we all vote.
Kira urged Malaysians residing in Singapore, Thailand, Brunei and Kalimantan in Indonesia to register for postal voting at www.myspr.spr.gov.my.
It's actually not very hard, to be honest. This process is not very hard. You need to go to SPR's website, mySPR, I think it's myspr.spr.gov. But if you just look up SPR's website, you'll be able to download the forms needed to submit. So depending what category of voters you are, there'll be specific instruction on the website. It's very simple. You just need to inform SPR. Essentially, it's a way to inform them that you live abroad, update them with your most current address, so they'll be able, and also inform them which constituency you're voting in, so that they can process and send out the ballots, especially after nomination day, because I think this time we only have 2 weeks of campaigning. So within that 2 weeks, the ballot has to be printed, mailed to you, and you have to vote and mail it back to Malaysia.
So we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll talk about two clear things. Number one, the property outlook, and the second is, of course, the issue of minimum wage. We'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back. This is the week ahead. As promised, let's talk about the property outlook. This is because Malaysia's property market is expected to rebound this year. But the recovery does hinge upon the country's handling of the various COVID-19 variants. And of course, how will the rising cases impact all of us as we reopen the economy or continue to open the economy. Because of that, we speak to Shailendra Nathan, the Property Guru's country manager, on the market segment's outlook. This is Property Guru's Shailendra Nathan.
We expect gradual improvements in the first half of 2022, but we do expect the second half to start to pick up the pace, especially once we see some economic stability in the endemic stage of COVID-19. We believe that that will improve the economic environment for property seekers. I think that's generally on the consumer side of things. Secondly, we also expect property players to embrace technology, given the new norms. And innovative solutions are expected to be rolled out to deal with these changing situations. Virtual viewing, obviously, is one good example that we saw being rolled out in 2021.
Shailendra said that continuation of loan moratorium initiatives and the easing of the Malaysia My Second Home MM2H restrictions will help boost recovery and buyers' confidence.
Some of these programs that were in place in 2020 and also 2021, the home ownership campaign, for example, greatly contributed to the stability of the property market. And I believe consumers still want those programs to be in place. And it was also spurred by the government initiatives, like the moratorium on loan repayments as well. And those greatly supported the industry. Secondly, there is a huge group of unsold properties, high-end unsold properties in the country. And the easing of the Malaysia My Second Home program restrictions is going to greatly help spur the industry as well at the same time.
He underscored economic stability is the key factor to boosting market confidence.
There are these threats of new variants, and I think we need some level of confidence that those things are being managed, and we move towards a truly endemic situation where we start to instill some confidence, not just with property buyers. This is the economy in general, right? So that plays a big role. Secondly, if you look at it from a consumer perspective, economic stability is very important. And in order for them to start opening up their wallet and start investing and coming back into the market.
Now, tweet to me at Ibrahim Sani net whether or not you are trying to sell your property or buy your property or thinking about relocating. Basically, if you're on the property market, let me know at Ibrahim Sani net. I am available on IG as well as on Twitter. This is because over the next few weeks, I'll be talking about the property market, both in residence as well as office property, largely because we want to really further explore whether or not what the thoughts and processes that Property Guru has is in line with what's happening on the market right now. because they postulate that the property market's going to rebound. However, the question is whether or not it really is going to rebound. Okay, one more item that we need to talk about, which is the Human Resources Ministry recently announced that a minimum wage of around 1,000 ringgit 500 or 1,500 a month is expected to be implemented before the end of this year. Some argue that this should be done sooner. Others argue that a simple increase in the minimum wage might not be the best solution. Here to discuss this is Center for Market Education's CEO, Dr. Carmelo Perlito.
Who are those workers that earn an amount of money that is close or even below the minimum wage? The Ministry of Human Resources says that we are talking about 8.8% of the wage earners. And I have reasons to believe that the bulk of these people would be made of immigrant workers, okay, foreign workers. So this is the first point. So raising the minimum wage means mainly raising the wage of these immigrant workers. The second issue is indeed that some companies may be ready to accept it and others may be not ready to accept the raise. And the third important issue is considering the risk that raising the minimum wage for unskilled workers, because here we are talking mainly of unskilled workers, could constitute an incentive for employers to replace workers with machines. So we need to be very careful if we want to preserve the income of these people, that we don't touch the replacement point between workers and machine.
Carmelo said the determination of minimum wage should be left to market forces. A certain amount of freedom should also be allowed for workers to move between different employers to increase competition.
The best way is not to have a minimum wage fixed by law, but to leave these to the negotiation between employers and employee, so that the wage can arise by by negotiations happening in the market. So obviously, some of the workers don't have a strong power of negotiation, so we need to be sure that there is an adequate framework to allow workers to eventually push for an increase in their salary when they are in the position also in terms of productivity to demand for it. And one of the conditions that I see as the best one is to allow them a certain degree of mobility between different employers. So in this situation, a competition will emerge between employers to get the best workers, and wages could eventually raise as the result of this competition.
So that's all the time that we have for this episode of The Week Ahead. If you missed out anything, or if you think that I missed out anything, just tweet to me at Ibrahim Sani Net. You can also look for these kind of shows on astroawani.com. Till then, that's it from me. My name is Ibrahim Sani. Enjoy the week ahead.